Hey everybody, Kansas Drone Gunner here. Welcome to Chapter 3 of the 308 Winchester project. Today's video is going to be geared towards the initial load testing and the analysis back in the shop of the loads that we're going to do. And we call this a Satterley test, and I'm going to do an expanded Satterley test. So if you want to learn more about that, then stay tuned. What's up, everybody? Happy Labor Day. Down here in the reloading room, and we're going to get, as promised, as part of the 308 Winchester project, we're going to go through a basically the full go, what it takes for me to go from brand new brass to loaded cartridges, and again reach out to that longer distance. So I'm very anxious to get started with it, and we're down here in my laboratory, so just a quick little brief overview on some of the equipment that we're going to use. I have a Forster coax single stage press that I use for my cartridges that involve precision. So anything 6.5, 6.5 Creedmoor, 308, you know, basically this is our 308 project. But and then what I'm using today is component wise is a brand new, I'm just starting brand new with some Lapua 308 Winchester brass. Okay, so never been fired, nothing on it yet. I use a FX120i powder scale and thrower, and it's got the auto trickler addition, so that's basically what makes it. The scale's a scale, but the auto trickler is pretty much what makes the precision. So it's accurate down to 0.2 or 0.02, I'm sorry, of a grain. So pretty extreme. And again, while we're doing this testing and doing load development, I want to try to get as precise as I can be. That way we can try to narrow it in. So I had really good luck running factory loads, just some Federal, I think it's Federal gold medal. It's more of a match grade ammo, but it uses 168 grain Sierra boat tail hollow point bullets, and of course Federal cartridges or brass. But I'm going to actually try to duplicate that to start with, and use that sort of as my baseline. So from an overall length standpoint, it's right at the SAMI spec of 2.8 inches. That's what we're going to try to run at. I did do a measurement of my overall length in my bore in the chamber, and it comes out to, I think with the actual Hornady overall length gauge, it came out to 2.875 inch. So, you know, again, 0.075 is 75 thousandths, pretty big jump for the bullet to get into the rifling, but it worked pretty darn well. So what I'm going to do is start with that and basically duplicate that 2.8 inch. And then if I want to maybe play around with it as we move forward, I'm going to run it out a little bit further and see where we get to on seating depth and jump, and see how big of a difference that makes. So as it stands today, right now we're going to run 20 brand new loads, and I'm going to go ahead and, even though I haven't, you know, done any kind of like a you know, firing of this brass or anything, so it's not fire formed to my chamber, I'm going to go ahead and do a Satterley test. But what I'm going to do is a 20 round Satterley test, so we'll get into those. I'm going to go out this evening actually and shoot, so I'll give all the data. I'm going to record all the data. I'm going to get the velocities and everything while I'm at the range, and then we'll put that back into the actual computer. I've got a spreadsheet that I've incorporated that I found that works really, really well. I've just kind of taken it and modified it a bit to make it my own. So I'll go through some of those details with you again today. So if this is something that you want to learn, you know, again, we're starting from scratch. I'll kind of try to do my darndest to show you a little bit about the equipment that I'm using as we go along. But the Forster coax is pretty much the gold standard in single stage presses. There's a lot of them out there. And I'm sure they all do a fine job. I just, you know, for my luck with them, I've had phenomenal success. And people that when I first started getting into the reloading, you know, hobby, I guess you'd call it, it was pretty much just told, get this one, you won't regret it. It's the best one out there. If you get something else, you might could get something that'll work, but you get something a little cheaper, you may always wonder, and you're gonna probably, it's like golf clubs, you end up buying more expensive stuff eventually. So for most part on reloading, I try to get the good stuff right off the bat. And trust me, I've gotten plenty of junk too, but it's part of the live and learn process. So anyway, we're gonna move over here to the reloading bench, and first thing we're gonna do is do a little bit of just neck sizing, and then we'll throw primers in them, and then we'll start charging them and seating bullets. So stay tuned, here we come. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and start charging some cases, and the way I'm gonna do this now, normal disclaimer for anybody that does reloading, this is the way I'm doing it. This is not a recommendation. Please consult as many references as you feel safe in your own reloading room and your practices. This is not something that I'm going to make a recommendation. I'm just going to show you what I do. So in this case, with it being 308 Winchester, I'm following the guide of the manufacturer to a certain extent. So I'm taking a couple of liberties, but the powder, and primarily you focus on the recommendation of the powder manufacturer. So in this case, it's IMR 4064 that I'm running, and for 308 Winchester, it seems to work pretty well for me, has over the years, and I'm going to be running that. I'm going to load 20 cases. I'm going to start at 42.7 grains, and then I'm going to run it up to 45.4. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll use the 0.2 increment elevation changes as far as the grain weight, charge weight. But in this case, with it being 308 Winchester, it's a fairly large case, but there's a wide spread in start to max loads. So, you know, based on my previous experience with other 308 Winchesters I have, I'm going to go ahead and run it based on this, but I'm going to load 2 for each. So I've got a total of 20. So, but I've got 10 charges. So 42.7, 43, 43.3, 43.6, 43.9, etc., up to 45.4, as long as my math is right. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and start doing that. Like I said earlier, I'm using the auto trickler. I have the A&D scale, FX 120i scale, which is phenomenal. And so anyway, we're going to go ahead and start doing that. So the first thing that I do is just to make sure everything's good and loaded, I'm going to run a test cycle. So I'm going to cycle the auto throw, and just FYI, I do that from an app on my phone. I don't know if you can see that, but so I'm just going to run the cycle auto throw real quick, see where we're at. So the first throw is 37.42. So I'm going to run this, and my scale's zeroed. I've got it balanced out, which is always a good practice too. Go ahead before you start to calibrate your scale. Okay, so let's try that just one more time and see what happens here. See if it's right the same. So 36.9. So I'm going to go ahead and come out a bit on that. So this is a little, kind of like a little micrometer basically. So 40.3 now. So I'm going to come out just a little bit more. Try it again. I got to get it right, pretty close to that 42.7 I'm shooting for. That's a little too tight. So at this point, it should be ready to roll, but we're gonna... So I'm at 42.24. So I'm gonna go ahead and set my target weight at 42.7, which I have my notes right here. And then you can see on my phone here. So I'm gonna go ahead and hit tap. I'm gonna tap to set the target. And then it's gonna go ahead and start spinning the trickler, which will take a few minutes, or a few seconds, to get it down to where it actually will start feeding. Must have been rubbing there. You'll see how accurate this gauge is, or this scale is, and the thrower and everything combined. So we're at 42.7 exactly. So we're going to go ahead and dump that. And then I'm going to run another one. And then we're going to go through the seating process. Alright, so the next part of this video is going to be about seating the bullet into the case. So the case is the brass, and we're going to seat the bullet and get it basically to meet this specification, which is, as you can read here, is Sporting Arms Ammunition Manufacturers Institute. And so the 2.8 inches is what we're shooting for. That is the measurement that I took from the factory Federal ammunition that I broke in the rifle with that I bought at the store. So I found it to be pretty dang good and accurate, actually, right out of the box. So credit to those guys. And I'm going to try to duplicate that for my actual testing to start with, and then we'll make adjustments, as I mentioned, as we move down the road. But shoot, I may find something right off the bat. So anyway, here we go with that part of it. Okay, so here we are back at the bench, and we are going to go ahead and do seat a couple of these bullets. So I've got my die set up here, and actually I've got several different dies, but I've had a lot of good success so far. I really like the consistency of this RCBS Matchmaster seating die. It's pretty damn good, really. I mean, Forster makes a good die. I think, obviously Redding has a good reputation, and there's others out there. But for a seating die so far, I've really enjoyed these. I've actually, I don't know how many I have now, 3 or 4 probably, different calibers. So I think I started out with it maybe on 300 PRC maybe. And really liked it there. So anyway, all right, so I'm going to go ahead and see where we're at. I'm going to go ahead and load one. I've got, again, a 168 grain Sierra boat tail hollow point bullet, Match King they call it. Actually, those are made not too far from here, Sedalia, Missouri. So let's go ahead and see where we're at, and we'll measure it. Hopefully I'm not going way too deep. It should be set up. I try to get it set up to where it's going to seat it a little long to start with, and then I can fine tune it down. So yeah, I'm actually at 2.8. I don't know if you can read that. Let's see here. Anyway, 2.816. So I'm going to turn this down. Should put me right at 2.8. Okay, let's see where we're at here. I can probably 2.801, so that's pretty much perfect. So I'll let you take a look. 2.801. They should be all riding within that now. Could go 1/1000th just to get it exactly. And again, I'm loading these at SAMI spec. So when I say SAMI spec, that's by the book. So we're going to do one more at 42.7, and then I'm going to go ahead and load out the rest of these. And I'll double check it, make sure I'm good. So I want to make sure that all of these are extremely precise and consistent on the overall length, and I'm good there. And as long as they are, then our test will be, okay, that's one less X factor involved. So, all right, so there's that. So let me load out the rest of these 20, and then I think the next stage will be going out to the range and getting some velocities and testing them. So we will see you there next.
Okay, everybody, it's Labor Day. I'm at the range doing the Saturday test today, so getting ready to start doing some load development. The loads that I did last night in the shop are here, so we're ready to start shooting them. And then we'll go home and do some analysis of the feet per second and everything else from the chronograph. I've got my chronograph set up, which I'll have a picture of that stuff and some technical details too. So anyway, we're going to get on it now, shoot 20 shots, and then we'll download the data. Dude, I may have.
Okay, got 3 series down the gut.
All right, we're on our 4 series here. I think we're up to 43.6 grains of IMR 4064. The glasses are fogging up pretty good. I think I'm going low on the target, which isn't a big deal, but the bullets are speeding up, so point of impact's changing a little bit. Okay. So far, so good.
That's it, we got our 20 shots, so heading back to the house, do some evaluation of data. Okay, so here, before we get into the data, I wanted to explain to you what I was using to collect the data, and this little device is called a Magnetospeed. It's the V3
chronograph. And what it does is, you can see from the picture I took in the range, at the range, that the bayonet attaches directly to the barrel of the rifle and literally sits about a quarter inch or so underneath the muzzle, and it actually will track the speed of the bullet coming out of the muzzle and immediately after it discharges the muzzle. So what that does is give you a pretty accurate, I found, with this feet per second measurement that you can bring back to your shop or lab or whatever, and I call it the lab, and you can download that information from the little data card that it collects it on, and then you can utilize that in your analysis. So what I was trying to do was come up with based on this test, kind of like a level spot that I want to try to focus on next, and I'll show you the data. I did find some pretty good data, but I just wanted you to have an idea as to, you know, what this thing looks like and what it is. Some people prefer, there's other styles out there. There's a radar. I have one of those also, and I like it a lot. But when it comes down to it, I found this one to be more consistent as far as the reading goes. In collecting the data, when I'm only shooting, you know, a very limited amount of shots and bullets, I want to make sure that I collect every shot. So accuracy may be affected a little bit by having the bayonet attached to the barrel. Some people think the harmonics change, and it may swap or change the point of impact a little bit downrange, but I'm really not too concerned about that when I'm collecting the velocities. And to be fair, I haven't really noticed that big of a difference, to be honest. So I found that, at least in this particular case, where you'll see the data that I collected, but where it's fairly obvious, I think, based on the testing, that the areas that I'm going to focus, the accuracy was pretty good too. So anyway, let's get into that next. All right, let's take a look at the data that I collected while I was out there with that Magnetospeed. So I ended up shooting a total of 20 shots, so 10 different increments of charges of powder. So what I do is I'll start on a low side, which, granted, as I mentioned earlier in the video, this particular powder with 308 Winchester has a pretty extreme gap between what they would consider to be maybe a starting load and a maximum load, which would be without question compressed, because I went up below the maximum load, and again, that's based on pressure. So you can overpressure the case, and of course that can create some issues with regards to your chamber and other components of the rifle. So obviously you want to remain in a safety zone. If you know, some people can stretch it a little bit, but and with this particular powder and this cartridge, there's no way I was going to go above where I even went to. So there's no sense in pushing it. But so this little spreadsheet basically is something that there's some guys up in the Northwest, I believe they call the 6'5" guys, and I want to say his name might be Steve Lawrence. He created a load development sheet, which this is really geared towards, you know, full load development, but I found it fairly useful because of the graphs that are incorporated. I have another sheet that I use for full-blown load development too, but this is pretty good, especially for the video. So what I do is I load each one of my guns into a template, and I have all these drop-down menus that I can select that'll auto-populate the above part. That's the part that I added. So the other end of it is all the data that I collect. So I you know, the chronograph creates its own data list when you bring it back to the shop and offload the data card. So you can see, based on the numbers, which hopefully you can see it, basically at load 1, we're starting out at 42.7 grains. Which, for those of you that don't know, a grain isn't just a little pellet or whatever, powder. That's a unit of measure for weight, and I think it's approximately 15 grains in a gram, if that helps from a conversion standpoint. So it's not a lot of weight. So anyway, the low end, load 1, is a 42.7 grains, and we're pushing literally right at 2,600 feet per second. So the factory ammo that I was shooting, that I'm trying to duplicate, was right around 2650 according to the box. I didn't measure it. I it could be a little more, a little less. But so as you can see, as you go up, and again, I'm doing 0.3 increments of a grain. So being, 43 grains being load 2, and I'm shooting 2. A lot of times most people just shoot 1 bullet to do a Satterley test. I like to shoot 2 only because I can maybe identify an anomaly. And essentially a user error anomaly with regards to my load. So, and I might explain that a little bit down the road too, because I might have found one, but where the load actually, the feet per second was a bigger gap potentially. It could have been an error on my part, or just, like I said, an anomaly. So I tend to try to use the mean. So in essence, the average of the two, to try to get more consistent. But anyway, so going all the way from, around 2,600, and you can see some kind of incremental step changes up to the highest load, which is load 10. And so we go to 45.4 was the highest charge that I used. And so there's, that actual graph, and then you can see in the next slide, which is the graph as the data is charted. And what I'm looking for there is a plateauing or a leveling of it. And boy, I sure like that 44.5 area. And I'll show you a combination. The reason being is when you start and you actually see the target that I shot. We'll get into that here. But for just to look at the data here, the 44.5, I like the tightness, but if you see where it kind of goes up to a point, there's a fairly high jump between, really you can look at 44.2 all the way up to 44.8. So when I go back out to the range and start doing my my next load development testing, I'm going to focus in that area, is where I think I'm going to try to focus my energies and loads. This is going to save me a whole lot of additional bullets and reloading and hopefully cost by running this first initial test. And then now I can go back out and load higher quantities in this particular range. Now I'm going to probably change it from a 0.3 increment to 0.2 now. And I might do like a 44.3 to 44.5 to 44.7, something like that, and just literally do like 5 of each of those. So so let's get the other reasoning is, let's look at the target itself, which hopefully none of you are offended by the fact that I'm not an Antifa fan. I've had about had it enough of all this crap and riots and protests and all that. So I just for fun, I made a little target for my 100-yard shots, and so anyway, if anybody wants one of those, let me know and I'll email it to you free of charge. It's just a PDF that I print out at home. So anyway, but what's really interesting is so when you get to loads 6, 7, and 8. There's a big spread on 8, between the two shots, but the actual mean, line, the blue line, is fairly level. And if you can kind of look, you see the first 5. So I shot a total of 20. So there's 5 shots at each target. So starting at the top left, there's 5 there. I don't remember which one was first. I think it was actually the bottom right target, which that's a cold bore shot, so I'm not gonna be too concerned about that. And honestly, groups, I don't really care. I mean, the 2 shots, there's 2 per load, so 0.3 increment change in load, grain weight, charge weight is enough to make a point of impact. I mean, there's a significant point of impact change based on, the range that I'm going from 42.7 up to 45.4. So you can't really tell it, but I adjusted the scope, several times to try to get it back in towards zero. And when you get down into the bottom left, okay, so the bottom left target is where I started to see the groups tighten up. And that coincides with the actual chart tightening up that we had. So when that chart tightened up, the groups tightened up. So is that a coincidence? I don't know. I don't think so. So it kind of tells me that I need to be focusing around that 44.5 area, because those were the shots that I found to be pretty much dead on. And, again, there's enough of a gap there between those 5 shots. I think it ranged over, well, see, you got 5, 10. So that puts me at 2, 4, 5. So basically I started down there on load 6. And so that's where I found my area. See, so 6, 7, and 8 seemed to be in there. And then as I got into like load 9 and 10, I think the last 2 shots were the 2 on the right target, the bottom right target. And as you can see, there's a couple of them that are up higher. I think that's where I started getting into that 44.4 range. Now, I'm not saying that wouldn't be a good load, but to be fair, that's pushing it for me. Why? If I can get accuracy and consistency and tight groups out of something less, then why? I mean, I'm not going to have any issues with, 27. We're basically running around 2,700 feet per second for a 308. That's a decent, for me, that's a decent speed of a 168 grain bullet, and I shouldn't have any trouble pushing out to the 1,000-yard mark that I'm trying to get to. So anyway, I just thought maybe I'd share that, give you a little bit of a understanding as to how, when I come back into the shop, I evaluate this initial data. So the next step that we're going to go into when I go back out to the range, I'm going to go ahead and load some, more bullets. So I'll probably end up shooting a total of I think 30. Yeah, so I'll end up shooting a total of 30, just in that 44.3 to 44.7, area, those 3 charges. So I'll shoot 10. I'll shoot 2 5-shot strings of each charge weight. And then we'll I think we'll narrow it in and should be able to make a decision based off of the data we collect, unless there's something weird. So anyway, next time I see you, I'll be, I think I'll probably do a little bit of video in the shop, doing some more reloads and give you maybe a couple of different angles of footage there, so you kind of see what I got going there. So anyway, thanks again. I hope this was informational and helpful to you, and we will catch you on this flip side for the next one. Have a good week.